Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. We have a great turnout today, and thank you for everyone who's tuning in the middle of the night or 4 a.m. We have the one and only Cathy Moore with us today, and I think I'm just as excited as everyone else here is. I do want to give a quick introduction just because some people may have seen all the hype all over LinkedIn and social media, but might not be as familiar with Cathy Moore and her work. I don't know how that's possible in this field, but Cathy Moore is the author of Map It. This is the book that I recommend to like everyone in instructional design just because of how much of an impact it had on me in this field. And it just feels like a breath of fresh air. And I really think if everyone applied what they learned in this book, we would like increase the global GDP by like multiple percentage points. So, and I did want to quickly just familiarize everyone with Cathy Moore's website. Everything we're talking about today, action mapping, Cathy Moore has so much content about it on her site. You can see here scenario design examples and even toolkits to help you on the job. So that's just cathy-moore.com and it will bring you right here. Some of you may know Cathy from this amazing branching scenario, Connect with Haji Kamal. I think it's been around for years now, but it's just a really solid example of what you can do with these interactive e-learning tools beyond just the typical infodump training. And finally, if there's a big client or company that you can think of, Cathy Moore has probably worked with them to help them implement action mapping. So again, you can see this on her site, but this process works. And we have Cathy Moore, the creator of this process, who has refined it over a period of, I think, 30 years plus. And she's going to answer all of our top questions about action mapping. So I'm super stoked. I know Cathy Moore is excited to be here. So let's all give it up for Cathy and thank her for coming. Hello, Cathy.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for showing up.
Hi, yeah, there is just so everyone knows, there is a bit of a delay between the chat and seeing us here on video. And I'm sure we'll get questions coming in about the different things we're talking about, but I'll do my best to add those and people can vote on the ones they want answered most because we will be going down that list. But Cathy, I was hoping we could start by you just, because we can see most people here are familiar with action mapping, but some people have never heard of it, a handful of people. So if you could just quickly tell us what action mapping is and why it is so important for our industry, I think that would set some good context.
Action mapping is should I be concerned about the echo?
Let's see how it goes.
Okay. Action mapping is...
Sorry, can you hear an echo on your end? Is it distracting you?
I do hear an echo, but I can try to ignore it. That's fine. No problem. Action mapping is a mostly four-step process to help us help our clients focus on the echo is bothering me. Is there a way we can get
before? That happened in a session before. Let's try to resolve it. Do you see an option at the top to toggle studio sound?
I have toggle mic, toggle video, toggle HD video. No.
Okay. Do you have headphones around by any chance? That may resolve it. Nice, perfect.
Sorry, everyone. Hang on.
Oh, it's okay. I think it's Crowdcast. We have over 200 people here live right now, so it might be Crowdcast acting up a little bit.
All right. Hey, that's perfect.
Oh, perfect. Okay, then let's move forward. So yeah, just quickly orient us to action mapping and why it's so important for our industry.
Action mapping is a simple process. There is still an echo.
Oh, no.
Okay. Action mapping is a process of questions that we ask to help focus our client on what is actually the problem and what is the best way to solve that problem. So we start out by identifying a goal for the project, which is getting the client to say what business measure will improve when this project is done. So we're not saying we need a course. We're saying we have a performance problem that we want to solve. And not only that, but we're identifying how the performance of the organization will improve when that problem is solved. So we put a number on it, ideally. We focus on a specific audience as well. We're not saying all employees will be trained in X, because that's rarely going to be effective. So we have a defined problem. We're helping the client do this. That's step one. Step two, we ask, what is it that our audience needs to do specifically, observably, on the job for us to reach this goal? They're performance objectives. They're not the learning objectives that I was taught to write, which horribly included things like understand and be aware. We're not writing that. We're saying Bob needs to polish the widget to a certain standard, or so-and-so needs to use the following model for leadership. It works for concrete things, and it works for leadership, soft skills, and all of that, especially if you have a specific model. So we're listing exactly what people need to do. Then we ask, still in step two, why aren't they doing it? So I have a quick flow chart that we go through that helps you help the client identify what are the barriers that are keeping people from doing these things, because maybe it's not ignorance, maybe it's not a lack of skills. It could be a problem in the environment. They have bad tools, bad managers. Usually it's a messy mix of them all. But through that conversation, we identify whether training is part of the solution. So if you have somebody who comes to you saying, we need a course on X, in these first two steps of action mapping, they may change their mind. They may decide, oh, we don't need a course, we need to change this other thing. The third step, assuming that training is part of the solution, is we brainstorm practice activities, which are often scenario-like things, whether they're done in a live session, in e-learning, but they're realistic practice activities where people practice doing what they need to do on the job. That fourth step, the least important, is identifying what information we need to give people for these activities. It's the reverse of a lot of instructional design, which often starts with, here is the topic we have to teach, and it's all about the content. In this model, the content comes last, and it has to justify its existence by saying, yes, they really need to know this factoid. They need to have this information in order to do this thing. So that's action mapping.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
and I
were you
wonder,
powering
if
through
you
the
mute
echo?
yourself, when I talk, do we lose the echo?
There was a very minor echo for us, but I was going to
Okay.
say, if it helps you, maybe just mute it so you don't hear yourself, because I know how distracting that can be. But
I can mute the audio. Duh.
okay, right. But then you just have to unmute it when I ask a question. But we'll make it work. Yeah, I don't want you to have to be distracted the whole time by that pesky echo. But it's good. I think it's good on our end. It's very minor on our end. So
Okay.
So yeah, thank you for that description. I think you basically went through all of action mapping like so succinctly. I imagine you've practiced that. You've had to answer that before. But I really like that you made that point about how content comes at the very end. Like, it is such a flip from how we traditionally do instructional design. And when I came to map it and read this book for the first time, it was after I was already in the field for like a year. I was doing so much of this, info dump type training. So then reading this, I'm like, yes, this is like all of my frustrations. And you're giving me a clear path forward of like how to deal with them and shift the conversation to performance, which is, I think, the way we want to go in this space. Perfect. So if anyone didn't know what action mapping is, I hope that has you sufficiently intrigued. I think now maybe we'll start answering these questions in the order of most upvoted to, and work our way down and see how far we can get in the next 50 minutes or so. So this top question is one of the ones that I submit early on. What are the most important parts of the action mapping process? So we know content is the least important. What's the most important?
From my perspective, it really is that first step of identifying what is the performance problem we're trying to solve. And the first two steps, identifying the performance problem and making sure that training, however we're defining that, is part of the solution. Because if we skip that, as I know a lot of people here have clients that may have skipped that, if we do skip it and we invest, tens of thousands of dollars in some big online course, and it's not going to solve the problem, everybody loses. the learners waste their time, we've wasted our time and money. So those would be the important steps to me.
Yeah, that sounds pretty crucial. I mean, if that, it seems like if that step is messed up and you start, oh yeah, we need training on this different topic, all of the efforts after that seem almost doomed to fail because you don't know if you're actually addressing an appropriate need or if this is going to help solve that performance problem. So that does seem the most important. It also seems like one of the places that most people struggle with, just because of how our industry has been functioning. Someone up the chain says we need this training, and then instructional designers further down are tasked to create that training. So I'm sure we'll get into some questions about that, but unless you want to tackle that now.
I want to respond to something in the comment.
Yeah.
Sarah says wasting a learner's time or money will lead to a snowball effect. And I think that that's what we've had throughout the whole, I've been doing this, like you said, 30 years in some form of design training.
Yeah.
Throughout all of it, people hate training. People hate training a lot of the time. Even back when it was live stand-up training and it was a chance to get out of the office, it's because of this. It was presenting content, whether it was relevant or not, whether people could apply it or not. And so this is sort of a way to rescue our own industry.
Yeah. And I definitely get that sense reading the book and trying to implement it in ways I can, as someone, newer, only in the industry a few years, but cool. But we'll keep going down this list of questions and try to, see what we can get to. And maybe if we leave out anything really important at the end, we can try to loop back. Okay, another question. How important are creative writing and storytelling skills to the action mapping process?
They become important when you are brainstorming activities. And actually, when you're doing the task analysis, there's two levels of analysis, which everybody probably already knows. You've got the performance problem, the analysis of the performance problem, needs analysis, performance gap analysis, whatever you want to call it. It's the analysis that says, yes, we have a problem that can be solved partly through training. But then when we're saying we want them to practice this very specific thing, we need to do, and this is something that a lot of people skip, we need to do a pretty close analysis of that task. And by that, I don't mean, what is the first step and what is the second, but in what context is it happening? What are the emotions that might be getting triggered in this context? What is challenging about this thing? And that's sort of a fiction perspective. We're starting already to see the story here. And then when we write the practice activity, which is often in my book and in my approach, a scenario of some sort, a decision-making scenario, then that's when the creative writing and the fiction comes in really strong, because we have to create believable characters. Everything has to be believable. It can't be over the top. We want to write concisely. We want to communicate vividly without a ton of words. So it does become very, very important.
Right. And you dive in and you kind of give writing tips even in your book. You say how to write these things and you talk about, show, don't tell, and the importance of being concise and making these scenarios realistic. So yeah, I love how, nuanced the action mapping process is. You explained it in 60 seconds earlier, but it really goes into so much, performance consulting, instructional design, creative writing. So that's good. And that's something I've noticed just working on projects where I try to use the version of action mapping I can, which I think is more scenario design. It's much more fun working on training where it's scenario based like this, because it does feel like creative writing sometimes, working with the SME to get their ideas, and you can even have fun with it and add some humor, which, you've done in your, I think I pulled out some quotes from your book that I wanted to share, but I don't know them off the top of my head, but it's just so, I think I had to have laughed out loud multiple times reading your book. So I love it. I love it. Okay, good stuff. All right, another question for me, and this is where a lot of people will be interested to hear this. So sometimes it feels like the client really is shopping for a course, and I know that's a term you've used in your book. So, in a situation I'm in a lot, a project manager says that they need a specific course built, and they're requesting quotes or reaching out to different developers to actually build this thing. So my question I added here is, will trying to shift the conversation to performance or a kickoff session when you know that you don't actually want to give them the course they're looking for, like, I guess that part of the question isn't very clear, but like, how important is it that you're talking to the right person if you want to have that kind of a conversation and say, and bring the focus to performance, maybe charge them for a kickoff session instead of, here's how I'm going to build this course for you. That's the gist of the question.
So the question is, let me.
I think succinctly, like, if a client is shopping for a course, like,
okay.
Do you have a shot at, if you're just talking to a project manager who's requesting quotes for a course, is it realistic to shift the conversation to performance in a kickoff session and say, let's consider all the other options out here? Or they'll just be like, oh, I'll just go with a different developer who's going to give me what I want.
I think key to this is how you market yourself. So who are you attracting in the first place?
Right.
And a lot of freelancers seem to market themselves as, I create engaging courses.
Mm-hmm.
So if you sell yourself that way and you get somebody who says, create an engaging course for us, and you say, well, I'm not so sure if a course is going to be, well, I need to talk about your problem. And they're going to say, wait, what you advertised is not what you're delivering. So somebody's just positioning. So if you position yourself as, not only do I create these engaging courses, but I make sure that they actually solve the performance problem. You're setting their expectations then, that they're going to have a conversation about the problem. So I think a lot of that is expectation setting. And I think it's also important, as in any type of consulting, that if you do start talking about the problem, make sure you're talking to the owner of the problem, the person who feels the pain, and not their minion. The person that they told, go hire somebody to make a course. You have to find out who feels the pain. I want to talk to that person.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, and I do think you talk about that. So it does seem important to be talking to the right person. Yeah, great point about marketing, and again, all this stuff is in the book, but yeah, I love it. Good point. It's just my experience with that. I think like last year, a little while back, I was like, I'm going to focus on performance consulting. After reading Action Mapping, actually, I was like, I'm going to take down my e-learning portfolio. I'm a performance consultant now. And of course, I'm a young 20-something with no background of producing results. So safe to say I didn't get a ton of leads that way, but I'm working on hopefully, working that direction over a longer period of time as I get more credibility. So
I have to say, I'm almost 60. And I have this blog site and I have this book, and people, when they contact me, they say, will you do a 2-hour workshop on X? And I want to say, what? I said, we love your work. We want you to do a 2-hour workshop on this topic at this date. Okay, they're missing something.
Yeah, that's irony at its finest. I like that. All right. So we have a question from Kristen here. Access to subject matter experts can vary by project. If for some reason the client doesn't provide subject matter experts of various roles, management, model performers, target learners, etc., how would you suggest going about the discovery process and uncovering what makes things difficult from the target learners and beyond just speculation from the client? So if the client says, oh, these people are struggling because of this, we need training to fix it. I think Kristen's question is like, do you take the client's speculation as like fact, or do you push deeper or how do you deal with this situation?
I think it would again depend on how you've marketed yourself, how you've positioned yourself. And you mentioned earlier sort of a discovery meeting or a separate package where you say, we will have a 2-hour session on Zoom. We want the owner of the problem, we want the subject matter expert all in this room, and we're going to talk about this problem. And there's a separate fee for that. It's a service I offer. And then if we decide that training is part of the solution, then we'll move ahead. So if you market yourself with that sort of package, then they'll be more likely to actually give you the access because they'll be expecting it.
Yeah.
And if you're marketing yourself as, I make engaging courses, then yeah, you're kind of stuck. And when I was moved into corporate e-learning, I worked at an e-learning shop that it was essentially that. Somebody came to us and said, we need a course, and we say, okay, and we make the course they want.
Yeah.
No questioning. They give us the content. We try to make it halfway digestible at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's most of people's experience in this space. And of course, there's some very big companies, keeping that an option. Oh, you want 50 courses or 100 courses? Sure, we'll churn them out. We'll have them right over to you. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that's how I've thought about it when I was going through this is, this kickoff meeting or road mapping session or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, that's where you need these people on the call. You need their input. You need to decide, is training actually going to help solve this problem? So it seems like having that as like its own offering would really help shift the conversation away from let's just make a course. It's let's actually uncover what we need here together. So good point.
And their respect for you goes up a lot when you do that too.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, it definitely, it's going to attract a different type of client, I would imagine. So cool. Okay, we have a question from Sangeeta here, and I'm sorry I'm not keeping as much of an eye on the chat just because it is going by quickly. So if there is a question you really want answered, or someone asks a good one and we miss it, please add it to that Ask a Question tab and try to vote it to the top, because that's what we're looking at to decide what to answer. All right. So from Sangeeta, how would you design training for skills that are to be built over a period of time? For example, instructional design. And how would you test the results? That's the question.
That's a very relevant question, because I am designing self-paced toolkits that teach instructional design. And so I've thought about this a lot. And they are, rather than, for any skill that needs steady practice, small steps building on previously learned skills, unlearning bad habits, which is a really tricky part, changing the organization's culture, changing how people treat you, all of that. Like, I would call learning instructional design to incorporate all of that, and including learning assertiveness, learning how to talk like a consultant. There's a ton of things. The approach that I'm using, and that I would recommend because it's more scalable than other approaches might be, is I'm creating a whole bunch of materials that are not little click-through courses. They're not talking head courses. There is some video, but they're mostly scrolling websites. They look like a normal website, like a reference website, but it's very focused, and it says step 1 in the process. It teaches action mapping. Step 1, you're going to do this. Why are you doing this? Why is it challenging? It asks you questions like, why is this challenging for me? Why is it challenging in my organization? You can type the answers in if you want. It has you practice each step immediately by applying it on your job. And this thing is designed to last forever. When you get access to the toolkit, you have access for life. When big organizations buy it, because they are big organizations, they want everybody to go through it at once as if it's a course. But at least they do space it out over maybe 16 weeks. So again, it's not a shot in the arm workshop. Nobody's going to learn instructional design that way. It's step 1. Now work on step 1 for a couple of weeks. Then step 2, we're going to work on this. And you're applying it directly to a project in your real life. You're not learning it in a little classroom and then going back to your job where it's irrelevant.
Right.
So it would be spaced learning. And even if you are stuck with using the tool you have, if the tool you have is like little e-learning courses, you could at least break them down into little e-learning modules that are delivered maybe 2 modules a week. And it's considered a campaign. A lot of people say, resources, not courses, campaigns rather than a course. So maybe it's spaced out over time and delivered almost like a soap opera, just another episode.
Yeah, and I've had conversations about, and I've had conversations with some other instructional designers who are implementing those approaches, and you even talk about it in here. It's once you have these practice activities, it's not something you do once and then you remember forever. Like you keep delivering them at set intervals of time to keep those skills fresh, keep giving people practice opportunities, and yeah, I love that campaign analogy. I think our industry would benefit a lot shifting from, take this 1 hour experience and now you're good, to more of a campaign where it's maybe, a bunch of 5-minute experiences just delivered week after week after week. That seems a lot more effective. And your points about, you know, teaching something like instructional design, it sounds, yeah, you're designing this toolkit and these tools. It sounds like performance support almost, that people can quickly reference when they're facing these situations as needed, not a sit down experience. And then, 2 weeks later, when I get into that experience, am I going to go watch that hour-long e-learning course again? so yeah, it sounds like
templates, worksheets, all sorts of things to help people apply it. So if we're teaching any sort of challenging long tail skill, I think it's very helpful to not just have the instruction, but also have the tools that help people apply it immediately.
Nice. All right, good answer. Let's see. We have another question from Kristen here. If there are several related actions that must be addressed in a single learning solution, how would you recommend approaching design?
So if you're not familiar with actions, we're sort of talking about performance objectives. If there are several specific performance objectives that are supposed to be treated in one package, how would we approach the design? Is that the question?
Yes.
One thing I didn't make clear at the beginning is that in an ideal world, we are not agreeing to the format that the client thinks they want. The client says, like they say to me, we want a 2-hour workshop on X. And you say, let's talk about your problem. And as you talk about the problem, you start to pry them away from that idea of a specific format of a specific length. Because when you get to the point of seeing that they want you to help people do 12 different things on the job, and it has to be a 1-hour online course, you can say, look, no, that's not going to happen. From the design, the analysis perspective, in action mapping, you might create sort of a visual map. And so you would have your goal, and then you would have this whole circle of actions that people need to perform to reach the goal. Ideally, at that point, you say, okay, that is a lot of actions. That may be more than we need. And one way around this is to have the SME prioritize them and say, these are the critical things that people really need to do. Either people are screwing it up a lot and it's really hurting us, or when people do this better, we will really advance towards solving our problem. So you want to prioritize them and do the deeper analysis only for the high priority actions. And then you might find that the other actions sort of come along for the ride. Like if we have a high priority action of X, we're focusing on brainstorming an activity for it. And we think, this activity could also sort of handle Y. So Y gets a free ride there.
Right. Nice. Okay. So, and that's where I figured you would go. Don't accept that there are going to be several actions addressed in a single learning solution. Figure out if that's actually, when you're doing your design, your instructional design, you decide how many, how you're going to split that up and organize that. So good point. And yeah, just doing more of that upfront design work too, figuring out what is most important, which actions have the highest priority, and then designing for those actions and including the other ones as they are relevant. Nice. Okay, Leslie here is asking a question about other resources. Other than your Map It book, which is excellent and has changed the way I approach my job, as probably everyone else who's read it, what books would you say are must-reads for instructional designers that complement the action mapping approach?
I would say, looking at my site, I have a bunch of books listed on my site, and looking at that list, any of the books on performance consulting, which is, I think, the most challenging thing for instructional designers, because if you're like me, you never learned that. I had to learn it on my own. So I've got Performance Consulting by Dana Gaines Robinson and James Robinson, which is a classic. It may be showing its age at this point, but if you find a better book on performance consulting, please let me know. And other books would be, I have some favorites that are a little unusual. Scott McCloud, Making Comics. He is a comic author, graphic artist. He has a book called Making Comics. I think that's what it's called. And it gives us a lot of good ideas for telling stories concisely, visually, and with impact. What was the other?
I think that's,
Look.
yeah. Oh, you can continue if you have
Working
more.
Minds by Beth Crandall and everybody else is a very nerdy, in-depth dig into needs analysis and task analysis, figuring out what is it that the expert knows, how do they know it, when do they know it, and how can we help novices get that wisdom. It's much more about, what's step one and what's step two of the process, and much more about how the subject matter expert, they have this expertise that they cannot even verbalize, that we're trying to suck out of their brain and import into the novices. How can we do it? They have a really interesting process for that.
Nice. You can hear me again?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good recommendation. And what was the last one you said? I might have been talking when you made that recommendation, the third one?
Sorry. Working Minds.
Working Minds. Okay, great.
By Beth Crandall and several others.
So making comics, I think that's a really good one. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that in recommendations about what to read as an instructional designer. So I think I'm definitely intrigued by that one. And seeing that, connect with Haji Kamal, like I'm imagining you probably have taken a lot of inspiration from books like that to design the type of experiences you do. So I'm definitely going to check that one out. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, we have a question from Trish. How do you measure the impact of the training on a business goal when so many other types of system interventions could equally contribute to an improvement? Training is generally accompanied by a range of interventions. How do we narrow it down to say training did this?
Robert Brinkerhoff has a method. It's also listed in my bookstore. Robert Brinkerhoff, the success case method. It's a combination of a quantitative and qualitative approach to evaluating a project. And it helps us identify what part of the overall improvement, assuming there was an improvement, what part of it can we claim as the training people most likely came from us. And so he does. It's not the totally statistical one that you might have learned in instructional design school. It's more based on, we identify some learners who succeeded and some learners who did not succeed. And we do interviews of them. And through those interviews, we figure out what worked and what didn't work and how can we go back and improve it too. That's another thing that's missing in traditional instructional design. We've made the course, we delivered the course, we walk away.
Yeah.
This is, we evaluate it and we look for things that could be improved, things that we could do better. But we also, from those interviews, we get success stories that we communicate up the chain of command to the decision makers saying, hey, so-and-so said that our workshop really helped them become a better coach. And that's why in their team, the engagement score has increased.
I see. That is interesting. Yeah. So it's not this very quantitative, oh yeah, this contributed to X percent in sales. Oh, it's not always like that in these situations. That's very interesting. You talk to the people who are succeeding, you get their input on what worked and what didn't, and then you pass those stories up. I like that. And that's the success case method, that book. Good stuff. And yeah, another good point, analysis, so important, evaluation, so important. But, a lot of the times people, say they follow ADDIE, but those two pieces are like almost completely non-existent. It's just like design and develop the courses. So always good to hear you draw attention to that. I think we could all do better. Well, a lot of us instructional designers could. Cool. Thank you for that. So another question, which people at an organization would be able to speak to business goals? Who are the right people to talk to when it comes to action mapping? And I think you addressed that a little earlier with the person who's feeling the pain, but if you want to expand on that, please do.
It's the person who's feeling the pain, the person who, the leader of the department that's struggling, who's reputation in the company is struggling, who's feeling the frustration of it's not working. That's the person you talk to, because they know, not only do they know what happens and what doesn't happen, but they are the motivated person to fix it.
Maybe I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes it feels like, you might be talking to this director of learning and development, but they still are very focused on their metrics are like the number of courses we can churn out and those type of metrics. So maybe that person, like, they need to come to this understanding on their own, and or maybe the organization as a whole just isn't as focused on the business metrics. Like, I don't know. I've run into that situation before. And I don't know, maybe you need to be talking to the person above that director who's feeling it. Yeah.
It's a cultural thing. A lot of organizations still have to catch up a little bit.
Right. Okay, cool. All right. I think we all know the answer to this question based off of what you've said so far, but do you think that all instructional designers should develop their performance consulting skill sets?
Actually, I have a surprise answer for that.
Okay.
I think some should and some shouldn't. I've been in e-learning design since there was e-learning, and I went through the K-12 and I did the corporate stuff, and I've seen many different people with many different skill sets. And some people genuinely love the development part, and that is where they shine. And I don't think we should be telling them, you have to develop performance consulting skills if they don't want to. If they don't want to talk to the client, I don't always enjoy talking to the client. If they don't want to talk to the client, then they should be a developer. And so I would say, if you are an instructional designer and you are frustrated with the feeling that maybe what you're doing is not solving any problems, so you feel like you're just putting information online, then maybe look at expanding your performance consulting skills. And if you're a freelancer, that would mean changing your positioning as well, so you get the clients that actually want that. But I don't want to say that all instructional designers need that. I think they need to understand the larger process and that what they're doing should reach a goal, but people have different skill sets.
Right. Yeah, as I said that, I think I was like, well, maybe, everyone doesn't need to be an expert performance consultant. If you have a team, it seems like you need one person who's really good at making sure you're focusing on the right thing and targeting those business goals. And then the other people can, do what they do best and design those practice activities or whatever it is. So yeah, I think that's a good answer for sure.
Some organizations I've worked with, they've come up with a sort of layer approach. The performance consulting type people are the first contact with the client. Once they put the stamp of approval on this thing, yeah, training's part of the solution and the training might look a little like this, then it goes to the more developy instructional designers, the ones that don't do the consulting.
Right. That makes sense. A good way to leverage everyone's strengths and skill sets. Good. All right, we have a question from Michael here. Hi, Cathy. Could you offer advice on pricing as an external consultant, especially if the best learning solution doesn't include a traditional course and involves more time analyzing the problem and convincing the client of the best approach?
We touched on that a little bit in talking about maybe what you offer is a kickoff package, some sort of package that has a set price in which you have the analysis discussion and confirm whether or not training is part of the solution. That gives you the understanding you need to then say, and the solutions that we've identified are pretty complex here, so that's going to affect my price. I can't remember what else was in the question.
I think that was the gist of it, and yeah, I think we did cover it with that session, selling that package. And again, like we mentioned, like if you do pitch a solution or a higher price tag solution at that point, after they did the kickoff meeting and you help them identify this problem, yeah, it seems like they're going to feel a lot more confident spending money with you when they see you actually want to solve the real problem here. This is actually going to help our business. This could produce a real return on investment. So yeah, it just seems like such a shift. So good.
And as I pointed out before too, that also increases your value in the eye of the client, which can increase your price. If you're using value-based pricing, which everybody should be doing, then they will see for themselves in this analysis discussion how their business will improve. When we set a goal, ideally, it's a goal that is measured in dollars, ideally. And you can help them see, if we solve this problem, we save or earn whatever this much money. Wow, this is a valuable person.
Right. Good point. And I imagine those value value-based pricing conversations, like, in the position I'm in a lot, it might not make a ton of sense because the training isn't focused on performance goals, or we're not targeting specific metrics. It's, we need this built. But yeah, if you can shift the conversation and say, we're going to impact this metric by this percent by this year, it's a really simple next question. If we had to put a monetary value on this, like how much money could this save for your organization? And then the next question, okay, well, if we can design this solution for this percentage of that, does that sound fair to you? And that might be orders of magnitude higher than what you would charge for an e-learning course if you're working with a big client.
Yeah.
So that definitely seems like the right path forward to make that shift to value-based pricing. But you need people who are on board with producing the value versus just producing the course.
And then again, it comes back to your marketing, your positioning if you're a freelancer.
I don't know if you can speak to this or if you have any thoughts on this, but I mean, just like from a market demand perspective, would you say like 95% of the people out there are looking for like just e-learning courses? I mean, that's the impression I get sometimes, but I'm sure I could work on my positioning and marketing, but yeah.
It's been a long time since I did
Right.
freelance e-learning stuff, but no, I think it'd be like 98%. I think it's pretty bad.
98%. That's encouraging. But okay, good. Okay, good to know I'm not just crazy, and it does really seem to be like that. That's funny. Okay, next question. What were your biggest influences in creating the action mapping process?
One of them was that I was moonlighting as a marketer. I was doing marketing consulting and copywriting for small businesses. And I saw how, especially in online marketing, and I saw how everything is measured. And you don't start it, ideally, you don't start an online marketing campaign without first setting your goals. We want, this many conversion. We want our conversion rate to be this. We want this many clicks. We want this, we want that. So they did not say, oh, I think we can convince people to buy our product by, sending them a course on something. And that's just never measuring anything.
Yeah.
You start with the increase in sales or whatever that you want. And I thought, why are we not doing that? And I think at the same time, it may have been then or a little bit later, it was David Merrill, the first principles of instruction. The idea of starting with the pebble in the pond approach. You start with the problem and everything comes out from there. Otherwise, we don't agree on the pebble in the pond. He goes elsewhere with that. But I start with the problem in the middle and everything is there to support the problem.
Okay, right. So you were realizing, okay, so we're not, focusing on the goals like we're doing in marketing departments. We need to focus on this actual problem, because trying to address one of these ripples in the pond, the splash is still there and it's spreading. I guess it's like the metaphor, right? So we need to get to the root of that problem.
In marketing, when done well, they have a specific goal they need to reach.
Right.
We weren't measuring anything. We were just saying like, oh, there's this problem, throw training at it. We didn't even measure the problem. So I wanted to put in the center of this map the goal. And the fact that it was sort of a round map, and then I read the Pebble in the Pond essay, although we disagree from that point on, but it sort of confirmed that.
Okay, I see. And is this something where, you were already, working in the industry for decades, or is this like slowly, like just, is this slowly developing in your mind, like over a long period of time? Like what, I guess I'm personally curious what that looked like.
I started out in training in 1981. Whenever it was that IBM PCs were born, it was my job to teach librarians how to use IBM PCs. And so I started out old school training, get up in front of the room. We have one PC for 30 people. And, we play with the thing. It was very hands-on, very interactive. I gave them exercises, all of that. And, fast forward 20 years or something, and I'm doing corporate e-learning. And it's all just, put information on a screen, make them look at it, check off a box. And I got very frustrated with that because I was missing the whole, hey, they actually need to do something with this. And that people were just, they weren't connecting with the learners at all. and they weren't identifying what problem they were solving. So I think that was 2007. I got so frustrated that I started thinking a different way.
Nice. Okay, cool. Good to know. Yes, I think that's a frustration we all can very much relate to. But now instead of having to write the process from scratch, we can map it, or use your online resources. So thank you for paving the way for all of us on that front. All right, a question from Lauren. I've tried action mapping and failed. I think the reason why is that my audience is not known to me, so it's hard to create generic yet specific, compelling examples that cover an audience that could be in tech, healthcare, manufacturing, finance, anything. I get really stuck, but I want to push past this wall. Love your work and love Map It.
This is a very common issue,
Yep.
and it partly comes from the powerlessness of many e-learning developers or IDs who are told by the client, this is what we want. And if the client says, we want one course for all employees, then yeah, you are really in a bind, because it's very hard to come up with realistic, specific, highly contextual activities that apply to everybody, because they don't exist. So there's two approaches to this. One is to, if you can, push back and say, we're using this approach where everybody gets to practice and do it in real world. It helps transfer to the job. So we need really realistic activities. And for that, we need to aim the activities at specific audience members. So we either need to narrow the audience to a group of employees that really can affect the goal, or break the project up and do analysis of the most highly impactful audiences and create, if we're doing e-learning, for example, we could create almost a database of activities, designing activities that work for these people but aren't appropriate to these, other activities that work for these people that don't work here, and then maybe some activities that are broad enough that they would apply to everyone. And then when somebody enters the e-learning, they identify their job role, and they see only the activities that have been tagged or whatever as applicable to their job. So that's two approaches. One is get the client to focus on the audience a little better. And the other is, if you're stuck with a broad audience, break down the activities at least so that they're appropriate to the different subsections of the audience. But that's a huge amount of work, because then you have to analyze all these different audiences and you might not have access to them.
Right.
So
and
I would get the client to realize that one course for all employees is a bad idea.
I think the position is Lauren is in just because I know a bit about Lauren's situation, and it's a situation I've been in before, and you even address it in Map It, but it's these positions where you're getting hired or you're at a company that produces training to sell to a wide variety of audiences. So so I think you said in your book, like, you're not going to be able to do actual action mapping here just because of the nature of the engagement. Like, you're not going to have access to those results you're producing. You don't have access to your target audience, because it could be anyone your company sells the training to. So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say about that, but
hopefully I dodge responsibility for that by saying that action mapping does not apply very well in that situation. That's very well in academia and education, where it's all about, it really is about delivering knowledge and testing that knowledge. Not my field.
But what I have found though in those situations is you just like the scenario design pieces of this and actually creating an action map. It does help. You still can move away from actually producing info dump training, but it's not going to be as effective. It's not going to actually be effective enough to maybe produce business results. But you could provide a different type of experience where it's it is scenario based. There are consequences. At least that's what I found in my experience, trying to apply what I can from the process to these situations.
Yeah, we can certainly design thought-provoking scenarios, and it may require a little more fiction skill even than normal, because we have to imagine this person that we've never met in this situation that we've never been in, and what might help them to do.
Yeah, sounds like it does take some understanding of who your audience is, but yeah, that is a tricky situation to be in. Okay, it looks like we got through all of the questions with over 10 votes here. I see one with 9. Let's see. This is from Marcia. Do you have any special tips on applying action mapping to microlearning? And I have an idea of how you might answer this, but I'll leave it to you.
I have to say, when I hear something like microlearning, my mind goes totally blank because I'm not sure what you're referring to. So I think we need to define microlearning better.
True. Yeah, I guess the idea is, if it's just small chunks of training, but I think that's part of action mapping. If you can design these small chunks of practice activities over time, I think you could even view that as micro learning. But like you said, I mean, it is so widely defined, right, depending on the source.
And what I would say too is that if the client says we want micro learning, you have an issue. Ideally, you're doing the analysis with the client, and through that analysis comes up various solutions. It's never just one. And one of those solutions is, hey, let's deliver small practice activities spaced out over time that they can do on their cell phone, if that's microlearning.
Right.
Then yes, it's part of the solution, and it fits into the whole action mapping thing perfectly fine because you've identified what they need to do. How are they going to practice doing that? Hey, the best way for these people in this situation to practice doing that, because they're truck drivers or whatever, is we send them a cool activity on their cell phone every day, every Friday, I don't know, and they do it and they practice over time.
Cool, good. Thank you for that. All right, let's see. Oh, this is a question. I've seen some mentions of this in the chat. Can you use, or maybe you already answered this a little bit, but can you use action mapping in a K through 12 or higher education context?
I know that people argue with me when I say this. People who are in K-12 or higher ed, they say they use it, and I say, I bet you don't. But because of the need to have a specific performance problem that we're trying to solve that we can measure, not a test, but things that people do on the job. It works in vocational, technical training if the evaluation is, can the nurse, correctly inject the patient? Then yes, you can start with that. They have these behaviors. We have a way to measure it. In K-12 or where I worked for a painful amount of time, also I worked in higher ed. The goal is usually to have them pass a test. In K-12, at least in the US, there are all those standard performance standards that you have to teach to. In higher education, you're usually teaching to some sort of test. So as Devin said, you can design cool scenarios and stuff like that to help them apply the learning in an imaginary situation. But the action mapping process, start to finish, just kind of falls down.
Right. Right. Good answer. And that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, because it's in a lot of these courses, it is focused on like knowledge and maybe these like intellectual, like cognitive skills to, critical thinking and stuff like that. But good point. Good point. All right. I'm just scrolling through here, and maybe we have time. We have 5 minutes left. Should we try to answer another question or two?
Sure.
This question I have here at the top, what is the school model? You coined that, and I really liked it because it just everything you explained about it, it makes so much sense with how training is presented. But yeah, what is the school model, and why doesn't it work for business training? We've been touching on it, but I really like that metaphor, so I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
The school model is a phrase that I use in the book and elsewhere to talk about the mindset that a lot of conventional instructional designers and conventional clients have, which is, if there is a problem, knowledge will solve the problem. We have this problem because they don't know this thing. And that's why we start with the content. They say, develop a course on this topic. Here are the 87 PowerPoint slides we've been using in training, turn them into a course at the end. Because they think there's an underlying assumption that knowledge will solve the problem. But obviously just knowing something does not change what we do. And if we haven't analyzed the problem at all, then we're wasting everyone's time.
Right. And I think part of that too, yeah, it's like designing for the test still. Like they do so much in these school contexts. It's like, yeah, you need to know the information, and then we're going to add a test at the end so that you can pass the test to prove you know the information, and then you get the check of approval and you're good to go.
And from that, there's a whole cascade too of, I really like self-determination theory. I've been digging into that. I even went to the conference in Holland. there's a whole impact on motivation from that approach. Here's some information. 3 seconds later, here's a little quiz question about that. Oh, you could pull that out of your short-term memory? Good job. And it
Right.
us like children, it just says, we think you are really incompetent because this is all we're asking you to do. It's bad.
Yeah. Understandably. So yeah, we've all been there. I don't know if we have time for this next question. We have 3 minutes. Should we want to try to tackle it? Maybe.
Sure.
Okay, let's try to tackle this last question. It's the last one with 5 upvotes, so let's do it. It's a kind of a long question. It's from Leslie. Leslie, on occasion, is approached to roll out training for new legislation or regulations. Sometimes through action mapping, they've been able to draw out what people need to do differently, and then they create more meaningful content. But other times they come to the conclusion that people don't need to do anything different due to this new legislation, and then therefore they can't use action mapping, but they're still pushed to produce content. So the question is, what would you do in this situation?
I actually have a blog post about this.
Perfect.
It's, again, the assumption that something has changed. There is something new. Therefore, everybody must be told about it. We must impart this knowledge to people. And there's various ways to look at it. And I think from the question, it's clear that you're doing some analysis to say, it's not really going to affect how they do their job. They don't have to do anything differently. So can we just send them a PDF saying, here's the new rules, the end, and have them check, yes, I have seen the PDF. That's what I would recommend.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Yeah, PDF. And here we go. Here's what they are. Have you read them? There we go. We don't need to do a 60-minute e-learning on it. I think that's a good answer to this, a really good answer to this question that wasn't immediately obvious to me. So I hope that was helpful. Good stuff. Sean points out exactly, it's communication, not training. People like that. PDF for the win. All right, good. So I think those are all of the questions we're going to get through. Thank you everyone for submitting your questions and voting on them. And coming here at 4 or 5 a.m. I know people are here at crazy times. I hope this session was valuable. My biggest tip, if you're interested, pick up this book seriously. Like you heard me say a million times, you talk about this in the book, but it's just because it's so comprehensive. And I've read some ID books and it feels like you're reading like a textbook. This doesn't feel like that at all. I personally was engaged like every step of the way. So, and if you're not ready for the book, check out Cathy Moore's site. So much good free content, toolkits for people who want to go a step past the book. So super good stuff, Cathy. I don't know if you want to say anything else, but I learned a lot in this hour, and I have a new wave of motivation to just try to use this more. So.
Well, thanks for organizing this, really. And thank you everyone for coming, for posting your questions, for being so active in the chat. It's been great to see everyone.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, you know where to find Cathy. She has a mailing list. Sign up for that if you're not on it already. And I will see everyone next time. Thank you again, Cathy.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.